Oh, there we go. We are live. We are live with Andy Tran. You're not on the video yet, Nick.
I know, but I will be soon. And there we go. Yeah, we got the hat. See, and it fits over the headphones.
Andy Tran is here because you're going to save Ontario's housing problems because of Suite Additions is going to be able to add property or living units to everybody's property right across the province. Dude, you are the secret to saving housing here in Ontario. It's all on your shoulders.
Pressure's on.
Because you're going to legalize second suites for people. Are you doing garden suites yet?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, garden suites. And then your laneway housing. Have you done any laneway yet? Coming.
Not on laneways. We do
Come closer to the mic. Come closer to the mic.
We do have a couple of projects coming up that are that have laneways, but this new policy that's happening, it's for every house, right? So laneway houses, that happened in Toronto a few years ago, but now with garden suites, it's really like 1 or 2 orders of magnitude higher than laneways because most houses don't have laneways or alleyways, right? So the number that I have for people is 2.8 million single-family houses in Ontario. Actually, that's only detached in Ontario.
That's what the number is, 2.8 million.
2.8 million single detached houses that pretty much are eligible for a second suite, like most likely the basement, and then also a third unit as a detached garden unit or backyard house. So it depends on what people refer to them as, but this is big.
So the 2.8 million, you're counting houses that.
Where'd you get that number from? I'm not doubting it. I'm just curious if you remember.
I believe it was a report from Ryerson's city.
Oh, one of those.
One of those reports.
Yeah, Ryerson puts out good stuff.
Yeah.
So it's 2.8 million, and you think they're counting houses that are in a zoning area that allows for second suites, or are you just blanket? It's a blanket statement. That's how many single family homes are in Ontario.
That is a stat for every single family detached house. So that doesn't even include semi-detached and townhouses that are also eligible. But that number basically means that, eventually not every municipality, because it's going to take a while for a lot of these cities and towns to come on board, but it's a provincial mandate that they have to essentially allow it. And now there's also a housing affordability task force provincial-wide that is pushing for minimum four units per single-family lot. Like, you don't have to build that. Like, if you have a single-family lot, you want to build a single-family home, that's fine, but the neighbor cannot block somebody else. That's under consideration right now.
And I think that's what Doug Ford's government has recently come out and said we should consider allowing everybody to get that kind of zoning approval for their lot without getting blocked by a neighbor who doesn't want a 4-unit next to them.
Correct.
Yeah, in certain cities. In cities, I think the population of over 100,000. So that's not province-wide, though. That one was just for larger cities.
You could be correct there. Yeah. But the 3-unit one with the garden suite,
that is
province-wide.
Province-wide,
Yeah.
So then there's a lot of opportunity coming out for more housing. What are you seeing, Andy? What's going on with garden suite specifically? Are you seeing people put these onto properties yet? Yeah,
we're starting to work with homeowners and investor clients on these. It's going to be a slow process. It's not something that I think all of a sudden, you're going to see everybody putting them in because there's still a lot of challenges at a municipal level for construction, right? There's even though the province has mandated that this is something that they want every city to have the bylaws and policies in place to allow them. There are inner workings within the city. There are utility issues and things like that they have to work out. So it's going to take a while. And also from the financial perspective, these aren't going to be cheap things to build, right? They're going to cost probably at least $200,000. So not every household is going to have those funds available. So we are speaking to homeowners and investors who do see this as an opportunity to effectively build on free land and kind of take advantage of that. But in other jurisdictions where these have already been allowed, like the west coast of Canada, it is a slow process. Like, it's been around for almost 10 years, and it's not like it's only a small percentage of small percentage of single family lots where people have utilized them. But I think it's, given the extreme cost of housing, I think that is probably going to accelerate faster than it has in those other jurisdictions.
Well, sure. If it's a housing unit for $200,000, where do you get a housing unit for $200,000 if you talk Golden Horseshoe numbers?
Yeah.
Nowhere, right?
But I see Andy's point too. I guess if a city is going to have like water capacity problems on a certain street and everybody puts down a garden suite home, this is what you're talking about, where some municipalities are kind of struggling to approve some because they just don't know if the infrastructure can handle it.
There are those issues as well. So as an example, I was working on one recently where we need to have a minimum of a 200 amp service to support these 3 units, and then the local electrical utility doesn't have that infrastructure there. So they said that if you are going to do that, and it's not an overhead service, it's an underground service, we're going to require the homeowner to, pay us $20,000 to upgrade that service line from the transformer, 5 houses down to your property. The homeowner is effectively going to be paying for some of that infrastructure upgrade because, they don't have the funds, right? So, that for a lot of people, that's probably going to make or break whether they're actually going to be, that decision, whether they're actually going to proceed, right? If it's going to cost an extra $20,000 or $30,000 and it's going to be very disruptive to the neighborhood, they're probably going to say they're not going to do it, right? So those are some of the challenges. Waters and sewers, yeah, that can happen as well, right? But to Nick's point, absolutely. Like where else, let's say it's 300,000 or 400,000. If you're going to be building a 2 or 3
that was a lot of inflation
unit,
you just put on there right now. Nick said 200,000. Andy ended up at 400,000. Okay, got it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're building in a laneway, a tight laneway in downtown Toronto, that's probably what it's going to cost, right? But let's just take that number, 400,000. So I'm working with one client right now in the Annex, right, in Toronto. You guys are familiar with that area, Honest Ed's,
yeah,
Bloor and Bathurst. Mm-hmm. So they have condos going up there, like studio condos that have there isn't even a bedroom. It's a studio condo and it's like 700,000, 800,000. Now, just down the road in a laneway property, they're able to build a 3-bedroom laneway house that they can rent for $4,000 or $5,000 a month for $400,000. So you compare apples to apples.
You're renting that at $3,000 to $4,000 a month.
$4,000 to $5,000.
$4,000 to $5,000 a month.
It's a 3-bedroom unit.
Yeah,
3-bedroom.
3-bedroom in Toronto.
How many square feet do you think that is?
It's probably main floor, second floor total, probably about 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
Right?
Holy
so it's
smokes.
a 3-bedroom unit right on the subway line, downtown Toronto.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
So it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah. So you said 200,000 before. This one's you're saying 400,000 or 500,000, whatever. And I know the 200,000 would be a different type of project in a different area. But those ones, when I spoke with you in the past, they would rent, we think maybe around $2,000. So across is a rule of thumb right now, and I know this is really generalizing, but is it that you're getting about 10% of the cost or 1% of the cost back on the monthly rent?
Yeah, I guess that's.
I would say, yeah. I mean, that's probably a good kind of.
Because the way I was doing the math, like a 200,000, if you rent it out for $2,000 a month, you get 24,000 over the course of a year. It's 8 years to get all your money back on the property. Plus, you get a lift on the value of the property with that unit there. You could probably even do some refinancing if you needed to or whatever if you wanted to. I'm like, just from a strictly a quick numbers perspective, I mean, they seem to.
So if
the
you have
numbers
the
seem to
capital
work.
or can get the financing to pull it off, it can work. But it's still a lot of capital you're dealing with. You have to get approved for a lot of money.
Yeah, and dealing with municipalities on you said there's some kind of infrastructure issues, and I'd imagine there's some issues just with approvals because it's so new to them. No different when the second suite started. They were a pain in the butt in some municipalities. Well, they still are in some municipalities compared to others to even get those things approved. So I'd imagine garden suites there's probably just as many or more hurdles to kind of climb right now.
Are you seeing any modular designs that could reduce the cost of some of these garden suites perhaps, and some of the design stuff that you do instead of maybe building it from scratch? Are some builders, I don't even know if that's a builder, somebody manufacturing modular type?
Yeah, so there's various methods for the construction, right? There's our traditional, everything on site. You pour the foundation, you do a stick frame on site, build, traditional, right? There's a full prefab, so you can get everything done in the factory and have it delivered, have it craned in. That's possible. And then there's also hybrid solutions where maybe they'll manufacture panels and manufacture certain types of foundations that can be put up, on site, that's a shorter amount of time, but it's it's basically a shorter amount of time, but the cost would be typically higher than kind of on site.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
When you say craned in, is it what finishings are done there? So like the structure is complete.
Yeah.
Roof, walls.
Like, is the interior
everything?
painted?
Yeah. I mean, some of them are. Some of them
Really?
are. Kitchens, everything already.
That's what I was going to ask. Kitchen,
So
cabinets.
they're just like attaching the plumbing, but the interior plumbing's already done.
Correct. Yeah. So the ones I've seen where not so much in Ontario yet, but some of the other places I've seen having these totally prefabbed. Everything in the interior unit's completed, and then there's a local contractor or builder that does the foundation, whether it's a crawl space foundation or a slab on grade foundation. They will arrange with the local municipality to do all the utility connections, and then the prefab company will actually come and do that installation.
I guess in some ways it's no different than a mobile home.
Yeah. It's not cheap. Yeah. And it's not cheaper yet, but it might get cheaper.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to get
Basically, when IKEA starts selling these homes in a box and you can drive home with your IKEA, IKEA is going to basically start getting into the modular home.
Can you imagine putting that together?
Yeah.
Takes me 2 hours to put together
With
a bookshelf.
one Allen key, you can create a whole house. With this Allen key.
It'll take
Can
you
imagine
4.5
going back to
years.
IKEA for the missing parts. Hey, I'm missing a kitchen sink and I'm missing a front door knob. Where do I get these missing parts in the self-service
Make sure
area?
you have 2 people installing it.
Yeah.
Make sure you use a carpet. Okay?
Yeah, put a soft
carpet.
surface down when you open your modular IKEA home before you put it together.
But you guys know the company Boxable, right?
I don't know if I do.
Yeah.
Boxable?
So that's the one that Elon Musk said he was living in next to his SpaceX
Oh,
factory.
yeah. I remember. That was a modular home?
Yeah, so that was the one where basically they have a facility right now in Nevada that basically are building these, and they start at 50,000, and they fold out. So they come in a flat pack and they fold out in a matter of an hour.
So it's here.
It's not. I haven't seen any yet, but that's kind of the goal. I mean, there's a lot of big tech money going into this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. And I think, I don't know if Andy, you saw, I think it was it must have been on Twitter at some point. Remember that little condo that we saw where the bed comes down from the ceiling and someone's office is created where like you
push a button and like one
wall moves over and kind of creates a little private office. Have you seen all this kind of modular stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you see that stuff. I don't know
more,
if some of that's real.
Yeah.
It's more
some of it's
novelty, I think, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Like,
novelty stuff. But you can see where we're headed. Basically, we're all going to live in 8x8 square boxes at some point.
Well, I mean, our density numbers in the city are so low compared to other cities across around the world that like our density numbers are going up for sure. This is normal. Like in other places, this type of is normal. And you're not even talking about small units. Like that laneway housing, what'd you say was 1,400 square feet? That's not even a small unit.
You're right. Because when we go through Europe and I see some of these older cities, every little square inch is packed. Like somebody has an apartment in a little corner of a building. Keith on our team is in Mumbai, India right now. Right. And we figured out the population was like 20 million, 25 million.
Yeah, we looked.
And how many people per square kilometer that is compared to Toronto. And it's like 5 times more people per square kilometer than Toronto, whatever the math that we were doing was. So in this area, we still have low density everything. Yeah. People, housing, all of it.
No, you know what? It's not a land issue. It's not a space issue. And I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about, living in, 100 square foot, tiny homes on wheels. That's not what I'm talking about. I think because the thing is, we have extremes right now. We have low density housing, which has been the traditional normal type of development. Everybody, moves out of their house, lives in an apartment or condo for a while, then gets the kind of the suburban home, right? So you have that on one end of the spectrum. And then you have the other side, which is extremely high density, these condos or micro condos, 400 or 500 square feet downtown Toronto. But like that middle part is missing, right? It's called the missing middle. That's what they refer to it as. And these are, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, walk-up apartments. And a lot of these places, they're not tiny. I mean, they're just regular, but they're making a better use of the available land and infrastructure. And that's what a lot of the policies are driven to, not necessarily to make a 200 square foot unit. I mean, if somebody wants to live like that, that's fine, right? But the goal is to kind of produce more of the housing options that are kind of in that middle part. And you see that a lot in places like Europe, where you don't have a lot of towers, but you do have consistent 3, 4, 5 story across every part of the city, so that you can walk out of your apartment and you can go to a grocery store within a 5-minute walk, or you can go to Do they have internet cafes still?
Yeah,
whatever.
Internet cafe, sure. Yeah, 2004, Andy. We go to the internet cafe. But you're right. The infrastructure doesn't have to spread broadly through the country to support a whole bunch of people.
No, and then there's the positive side of it is it can create a nice community atmosphere as well. Because in a lot of areas, you get more of a sense of community when you have a little bit of higher density. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And then I think what happens is, like our rental stock is, we have some of those types of properties, right? In Toronto, let's say. And those types of properties as rental stock just haven't been maintained for the most part the way that other properties have. But when you go to some of these places, if you use Europe as an example, in some of these cities, you see these old buildings that you're just like, oh man, look at like some old nice architecture or whatever. But then you go in the building to some of the units and you're just blown away about it's so modern, beautiful, new materials. You're like, holy, this place is it's just amazing when you get that. And it's just, that feels like, to your point, exactly what we're missing here. We don't have those types of units. It's either an apartment that could be that size of unit, but it's an apartment that hasn't really been maintained because it's just a rental apartment. And most of the rental stock in Toronto is like from the 70s. So it hasn't been maintained much. Mm-hmm. Or we have new condos, which are typically, they've gotten smaller and smaller. So there are some larger units, but for the most part, they're smaller units. Or detached housing, there's nothing in between. And I think that's definitely the Ontario Housing Affordability, the report they just released, that's definitely the focus, is to try to kind of infill that portion of it.
So it would be garden suites, 1,200 to 1,700 square feet would be kind of a common maybe size that we see.
That's probably a little bit larger than what would be typical. So that 1,200, 1,700, I'm more talking about the kind of the double 2-story Toronto houses where the laneway type houses, but the garden suites are probably going to be under 1,000 single story.
So 800 to 1,000.
Yeah, 800 to 1,000.
Okay, something in that range.
And it is more along the lines of the rental that we talked about before, Nick, the $2,000 mark.
Yep.
Right, like the Toronto downtown one, that's totally different.
Yeah,
because it's a different market. But you can do let's say 200 to 300,000 is kind of a rough number, depending on the type of finishes, depending on the size. How complicated the utility connections may be. Let's say that $200,000 to $300,000 range. I think just roughly a $2,000 rent is something that is fairly reasonable.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say what's going to be interesting on these projects is what kind of property value lift you get. That's going to be the interesting thing, and that's kind of the unknown.
Right now, I'm sure the appraisals just are clueless. They don't know what they're doing with those ones.
Yeah, like they might not even give you the construction costs, right? If the hard costs are $250,000, they might not even give that to you, which would be, it's a hard sell in that case. But it'll be interesting to see longer term how that changes. Yeah,
the banks have no clue. I mean, it's so new that they don't really want to touch it. But if you talk to alternate lenders, credit unions, and you show them the numbers and what can be done, they see the opportunity there, right? And in any kind of new innovative housing, it's always going to be the smaller lenders that are going to jump on board first, right? The ones that are more agile, as opposed to the kind of the big banks. But I think eventually, within a few years, once you see these more more widespread. And then the housing policies change, I think they're going to come on board because they're going to see the opportunity that this is something they can profit from.
And so what's the process right now? If someone comes to you with a property in I don't know, pick a random city in Ontario, what would be the process to go through? Someone comes to you and says, hey, Andy, I got this property.
Yep.
What do you go through to determine if we can put in a garden suite on that property or not?
Yeah, the first thing is just to look at the bylaws specific for that city, right? So, using the Hamilton Mountain as an example, a lot of people are coming to me right now. I have a property on the Hamilton Mountain. Here's the size of the lot. Can I build? Or I have an existing garage. Can I convert this? And, we have a quick look at it and we'll say, these are some of the things that we're seeing, some of the challenges. You can go for an applicable law review.
What are some of the challenges that you see?
I would say probably would be the things like separation between the houses. If the lot size isn't large enough, like it's a very shallow lot, sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Parking for sure is going to be the big thing for cities.
Because you need a certain amount of parking spots?
Correct. Yeah. So, specific to Hamilton, not only do you need a certain number of parking spaces, they have to be arranged in a way where they're not obstructing each other, right? So you can't have 3 parking spaces that are tandem, like single file, because then that causes problems. So those kind of challenges, you have to work those through with the city planning department. So we have we have a few projects where we're kind of in that minor variance process with the city of Hamilton and other places as well.
And then so you look at it, you see if it'll pass the city's bylaws, and then if it does, then do you start whipping up a design for this thing? What's the next step?
Yeah,
Passes
so
the city, you're like, yeah, we're going to get through the city on this. Then what?
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of the first step, right? The city, and then we kind of do the consultation, and then once we get the green light, that's when we go deep into the design process, right? Say, hey, how many, how exactly what the layout you want? Do you want, how many bedrooms and things like that? Although we kind of have an idea at the beginning what makes sense, right? I always encourage people try to make 2 bedrooms, right? Because that's more of a flexible product. And then we go deep into the design. Like, do you want what kind of exterior do you want? You want a flat roof, you want a pitched roof, those kind of things.
And then once you and your team now does a design,
yep.
Then who's doing the build? Are you doing the build? Do you have contractors that you work with that does the build?
Yeah, so we function like a typical house designer or architect, where we work on the design and the permits, and we may recommend a local contractor or builder who has where previous clients may have had success with, or they may bring somebody in that they've worked with before, and they would do the build.
And then the process could take how long, I guess, from what you're seeing right now? Let's stick with the Hamilton Mountain since you brought it up.
Yep.
Start to finish, what's that going to take me to get it done?
Well, we're just actually, because the bylaws only passed in around summer of last year, we were really just getting started. So now we're actually getting approvals now.
You're getting approval. So
yeah,
you're going to, so a year. Well, no, you said it just went into approval.
Yeah.
Now.
No, once I think there's been some precedent set with the cities in terms of exactly how all the utilities are going to work. It's going to be a quicker process. I think that if you plan things well, you can probably get one done in the 6 to 9 month range.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Like,
Really?
for example,
That's
second suite would be
approvals and construction.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems aggressive to me, but
yeah. I mean, I kind of say 6 months roughly for a second suite, right? Like, if it takes 2 months of design approvals, and then another 3-4 months for renovations of a basement second suite, to me that's fairly reasonable, as long as you have a reputable contractor to do the work. So if I'm building
that's a big, as
I
long
like how
as
you just slipped that in.
Yeah, that's like the easy part.
As long as the contractor's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So you add another 3 months for a second suite, and when we do small scale infill, like where we're doing severances and things like that, not including the the approval process, but just the the design phase and kind of getting the construction, we always give it about a year, right? So I think that garden suite is probably somewhere in between.
And then I guess there's an obvious answer to this. I just haven't thought it through yet. If I have an existing property, Nick, I'm thinking of one of our properties, have an existing property where we have a family in there who's renting the property, but I know it would qualify for a garden suite. That lot's big enough.
Oh yeah.
Do we have to then get approval from the existing tenant? Because I guess they rented the house from us and they assumed the whole lot was going to be theirs too. What did they rent from us? Did they rent the house? Like, can we just put a second suite on
looked
here?
into it. That's a good question.
Like, how do we get approval? It's our lot. We're renting the house. Are we allowed just to go to the tenant and say, hey, we're carving out this section of the lot to build a second house?
My guess is probably not. We'd have to check. I'd have to look into
it.
Have
you faced that one yet, Andy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
That's a common issue. So right now, for anyone in that situation where they already have a tenant, it depends on the lease agreement. If they're renting out the entire property, like single family home, the entire property,
it'll just
most
say
likely,
the address,
right?
So yeah, I guess they are. It's going to say the address they're renting out.
Yeah, so that would be something where they would likely have to agree. Like, I don't think you can just go in and build something in the backyard, because that's...
Hey, guess what? You're getting a new neighbor right in your backyard. I shouldn't laugh.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what you're telling them.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
But nowadays, just because of where prices are, a lot of investors are looking at this third unit to even make the project feasible, right? Like, if you're going and buying a single family house for $800,000 or $900,000, you have to put
$800,000. That's so December, man. We're 1.1. What are you doing? Yeah. Things have calmed down a little bit right now, though. The last couple of weeks, instead of 15 offers, I was just talking to Ruben, and he's starting to see a couple of properties with no offers. So just in the last week, what are we kind of past the mid of February, things are starting to change.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, with a little bit of an interest rate scare, some other government announcements, and the snow melting, and a little bit of inventory coming in the market. We'll see.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I like how that little scare is enough, and they don't actually have to raise it.
Yeah. It's smart.
Well, I think they raise it, but they raise it just it's not going to be like what were the initial projections?
I think it was like eight raises
over 2 years.
2 years.
I'm just like, if they do that, I'm not worried about the real estate market. I'm worried about way more than that.
I think they could get in 3 raises over 2 years. Well, 3 years. They might try for 3 raises this year. I got to think they're going to go in the U.S. for a half point in March. So
You think they're going to go half in one shot?
I think so.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like they're going to go for half. Like inflation there.
Officially, it's like 7.5 or something.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's the highest since the 1970s. So what? They're going to see the highest rate since the 1970s and go, here, I'm tossing you a quarter point increase.
Well, they didn't even raise in January.
Yeah. Our Bank of Canada, with insane inflation here and property prices going out of control, thought, we won't raise. Under what conditions are you going to raise if property prices are going up like 20% year over year more, and the highest inflation print that we've had in forever, and it's like not raising rates. So I don't know. We'll see. I got to think it's going to be half a point. We'll see.
You know how we're arguing about, like, we're splitting hairs
Half
here.
a point.
Like quarter and a half.
That's the state of our world right now.
If you look at the long-term trend in interest rates, it's hilarious because it just basically is this downward slope.
Yeah,
like
we're not talking like 3% or 4%. We're literally debating.
It's a double black diamond hill downwards. Is what it's been.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, we just took a little tangent just on the state of the market, but to make the property feasible or the project feasible.
Yes.
Then people are including this in the whole project because this will generate enough income to pay for the purchase of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. So I'm in that situation right now where I rented a house to a tenant living upstairs. I'm doing the second suite in the basement, and I'm also doing the garden suite as well. Now I did inform him. I actually showed him a document on what it's going to look like roughly, and had him sign it and agree that he was okay with me doing this 3 unit. And I think it's more palatable when it's a single property with 3 individual units, because then it's like, well, I don't own the backyard, but it's better when you plan it ahead of time to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. You're going to have your slice of the backyard or a patio space or whatever. This is your parking, and this is what I'm going to do, right? So don't try to hide anything. Right? If you have an existing tenant, explain to them what you're going to do. Don't just, bring a crane in and
drop something in
something in the backyard. And
it makes sense. I just hadn't talked it out, but of course it makes sense now.
So talk to them, or if you haven't rented out yet and you're going to be renting out, let them know what your intentions are. Right? You'd rather them say, no thanks, not for me. I don't want to be sharing it, or like at least they know and they can't argue it later on.
With the state of things, it's not going to change demand for your property. If you have a unit and you're like, hey, I'm going to be putting this in here and it's a nice unit, there's so much demand from people looking for good solid housing that it's not going, it's very rare that it's going to really impact someone's decision, I think.
So and then Andy, what are you working on most commonly now? What type of projects? Is it second suites? I'd imagine still are number one. Infill projects, garden suites now?
I would say I pivoted a little bit to focus, second suites has always been there. And it's always kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's almost like you have to do it, right? The duplexing or the adding the second unit. So that's pretty much whether it's converting an existing one or doing one from scratch. It's almost kind of like just the first step, right? And I've pivoted a bit to more focus on the garden suite right now, just because I think it is such a big opportunity with larger lots, deeper lots that you can have that. So I've moved away from the infill development for the time being, focusing more on that for now. So we'll see what happens, how it's going to be in the next couple of years.
So for those garden suites, what are you doing for plumbing? How are you connecting the plumbing on those?
You're
going to dig to.
That's literally a shit show.
But most of them are connected underneath the basement.
Yeah.
So how are you going to go? You're going to have to connect there.
Correct. Yeah. So there's 2 components, right? There's the water supply, and then there's the other part. There's the drain.
Yeah.
And so the service line that's coming in, you have to ensure that that's enough capacity, right? So typically we recommend having a 1-inch service line coming in, and then from there you can subdivide that into individual meters, and then have each one servicing each unit. So that's what we're doing. either 3 separate meters if the city allows us to do it, so there's separate accounts, or we have one main and then we have sub meters where you do your own kind of.
So you're digging trenches from the demarcation point, I guess, to the city, and extending that line, changing that line.
So it depends on the municipality. So some will allow you to go through the main house. Right.
Oh, got it.
So that
Okay.
service line comes in through
Okay.
the main house and you just have a rough in and you kind of bring it to the back. Some will have you do a sort of a Y or a T connection in the front lawn, right? But they won't allow you to connect directly to the city. So
Okay.
the idea is
everything's on your property.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can't call the city and say, I want to have site servicing of a new pipe.
Yeah, because there's only
directly to
one
the city.
line coming into the
And
lot.
that's for water coming in. Is the sewage going out
Same
the
thing.
same thing?
Same thing.
So the sewage going out can go through the existing home sewage system?
Again, depends on the municipality. So some will say it has to go through, and then some will say you have to do a T connection or a Y connection in the front lawn or something like that.
I think I'd want that at the front lawn, right? This just seems like a lot of capacity going through. I know
It's not really capacity. It's just the opportunity for issues coming up and stuff like that. It's just easier to be able to dig on a trench on the outside if you need to, versus inside and
Yeah, it
not having
gets
to destroy
clogged.
and not destroying the house too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess if the house is unfinished, then it's not such a big deal. But if the house is already finished, that's definitely not
I'm
an
just
option
thinking
that
of
you want
snaking
to
the
take.
drain too. Like if you have somebody who's not home in the main house, but then you have a sewage backup in a garden suite or something. Now you got to snake out really far from like maybe the back corner of the lot going forward.
Yeah,
It
well, I
presents
mean, we just follow the plumbing code, right? So whoever the plumbers that's doing it, they will do the calculations and say that based on the number of fixtures that we have, let's say 3 kitchens and 3 bathrooms or 4 bathrooms.
Here's what we need.
We need whatever line. And then if they say that can't support it. But the idea is that the one single 4-inch pipe that extends from that original property to the city's drain system, that's going to be sufficient for 3 units. I mean, that's what it is right now for triplexes. If you have a triplex, it's 3 bathrooms and 3 kitchens minimum, right?
Have you
It's the
dealt
same
with
thing.
have you dealt with mail in any of these properties yet, where it's the public pickup spot? Like what's that called? The community mailbox, as opposed to. And how are you dealing with that? Does everybody get their own mail from those things?
So for 2 units, I don't know for 3 units because we haven't done fully completed any yet. But for 2 units, if you can prove that it's legal, then Canada Post, I believe, will allow you to have an extra one. Some cities have. Some of my clients have contacted Canada Post and they've gotten a community mailbox.
Oh, really?
actual
With different
Yeah.
boxes, if the community mailbox can handle it, because we've had
Correct. Yeah.
Because we've had a situation before where we had multiple people putting their hands into the same box and just taking their mail. It was a little bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I think it depends on the area.
Okay.
And if they don't have that and it's just a mailbox at the house, then we just have a separate mailbox.
And then what about garbage removal in these garden suites or even second suite stuff? What's the best way to do that? They each take care of their own garbage? How have you been handling that?
We always recommend to our clients to have separate garbage, right? And some cities will allow you to pay extra for a separate garbage bin. Usually there's no limit for recycling, I think. Recycling
Usually
and compost,
not. I don't
right?
think I've seen limits on recycling
think
and
you're right,
compost.
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
But garbage bags, like I know in Oakville, it's like 3 bags. Otherwise, you have to buy the tags and attach a tag every bag after that.
Yeah. So in a lot of the cities that we're working with, usually I think if you have a lot of garbage, you can pay extra for just general garbage. But for compost and recycling, I think it's unlimited.
Okay. So the things to think about, bigger things are just, is parking going to work where it's not tandem? I know that might not be in all cities, but you
Yeah.
mentioned Hamilton, it's like that. I'm sure for other ones, it's going to be similar.
Yeah.
So you need to consider parking. You're going to need to figure out things like water and utility capacity. You'll have to get that from the city.
Mm-hmm.
There's basic things to think about, or more operational things like mailboxes and garbage removal, but that's just operational more. You could figure out that almost after the fact. But those are some of the things to think about. Then all the rest is just a classic construction job. You need the design, you need the permit to do it, and how much is the build going to
I think
cost?
the permits are still the question mark because there's still site coverage issues, right? Is there still site coverage issues in some of these places?
You mean as in
Lot,
kind of a
lot
percentage?
coverage, yeah.
Yeah. So they'll say, you have a 5,000 square foot lot. We'll allow you to go 10%, so 500 square feet. Or they'll say the total of all your buildings cannot exceed, 25%, 30%. So there's different criteria.
Yeah, that's where the problem comes in, is the total of all the buildings.
Yeah,
depending
that
on
is
the
the
lot
problem.
size.
Yeah, got
So
it.
site design is going to be very important. Like if you can design it so that it feels like a separate property, like somebody walking in doesn't feel like I'm actually in someone's backyard, and the person that's living in the main house doesn't feel like somebody's in their backyard. I think that is going to be key if you can design it from an investor perspective.
Sure.
Now, from a homeowner perspective, if someone's building that for their mom or their grown kid, that's probably fine. But I would, as an investor, I would design it to be more flexible so that if a tenant lives here, it's going to be comfortable. If it's somebody's family member because they want to buy the house and they want to have a multi-generational household, then it's going to be comfortable for them. They're going to have parking access, right? And a lot of these are going to be suitable for a lot of immigrant families or people who are coming here and they're starting out and they're going to be used to living in, where they're coming from, they're probably used to living in very tight quarters, right? Like, I don't know, Hong Kong or somewhere or Europe or something like that, where, a lot of the houses are very densely packed together. So they're going to be okay with, living in a single family neighborhood with access to community centers and schools and things like that. But they're just going to be, instead of living in their own house, which nobody can afford anyways, they're going to have, half of a property or a third of a property type of situation.
This really gives a lot of investors I know there's challenges to do this, but if you have some older properties that you've purchased, this really opens up a lot of floodgates. I know there's the financing cost to kind of get through, but Andy, I'm just thinking of your property now. That's one single family type home. It sounds like that you're making a legal second suite. You're going to possibly add on this garden suite at some point in the future. Mm-hmm. So the revenue out of this one property now is really going to be, if I'm guessing in Hamilton, top unit 22,000 something, bottom 2,000, 4,000 plus. How much would you rent out a garden suite in Hamilton for, do you think? Guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in that 18 to 22
No
range.
way.
Yeah.
Okay, so
depending on the size.
So now
and
we're talking
location.
about this one property can generate like $6,500 to $7,000 in income every month. We're talking about $6,500 to $7,000 on one property.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Properties are going to go, the price of investment real estate is going to skyrocket.
It could. It'll be interesting to see. I just did the math on a $200,000 mortgage. So mortgage, not line of credit, at a 2% interest rate over 25 years. I just picked numbers. 2 is actually probably a little bit low. We should probably bump this up to 2.5 right now. So 2.5, because this would be to finance the cost. So it's $963. So let's say it's $1,000 a month to build. If you borrow the funds to build, we're using some round numbers, it's about $1,000 a month. If you can rent it out for $2,000, that's what I was talking about with the numbers.
You're creating $1,000 in cash flow by dropping one of these things.
If you have one of the property, if you have that property sitting there,
and if you have the land already.
So the key component that I always talk about is the fact that it is quote unquote free land, right? It's not even land that you have to sever or develop. There's no development fees because that's what they're encouraging you to build. So if you have that land, that's effectively, a big chunk of the development process is the land. So now it's really just the cost of construction. And that's why for the 2x capital allocation that you have to put in, you're getting 3x in cash flow because of that land component, which is why it makes sense.
This is crazy.
Yeah, it opens up opportunities for sure. We'll see how it goes. And then some other ones, like if you're sitting on one of these, a decent sized lot, so let's say Toronto and one of these other cities, if they start allowing up to 4 stories and 4 units, the single family lot becomes the land grab, right? If you can get decent sized lots right now, it's not just, and yes, right now you might be paying a little bit of a premium and the numbers on the rental might suck, but it's no longer, maybe the real estate investment side of things is no longer throw a dart and everything works. It's more like, hey, you got to find something and then put some effort in to make it work, but you can still do it in a very profitable way.
But everybody who's out there who talks when their neighbor tells them they can't get into real estate now because there's no cash flow, if you just ignore that and you do, Andy, what you're talking about here, you can build monstrous cash flowing properties here. I know if you finance everything up to like 0% down, you took the down payment from another properties, maybe there's not going to be cash flow. But if you're buying some properties now that would cash flow as a 2 unit, you're adding on more cash flow by adding on the garden suite. I know you have to borrow more. Like I understand
as long as you can finance that capital, as long as you can finance it, then it makes sense.
Yeah, as long as you can finance it, it makes sense to drop on a garden suite to the property. You're adding more housing to the housing stock on top of it.
And it's harder right now, which is why the opportunity is even greater because not as many people are doing it. Because the financing, the appraisals, like you were saying, some banks don't want to touch it. So right now the municipalities don't even have all their kind of ducks in a row. So it's more of a pain in the butt.
Duplex in Hamilton, sorry, and I'm just thinking through this. The duplex in Hamilton is currently selling for like $1.1 million because we're starting to see 1.1 million on some of them. Nicer ones, newer, they're done, second suite, done properly, 1.1 million. So now you drop one of these onto that same property. The smart investor is going to outbid anyone else at 1.1 because they're going to see an extra $2,000 in revenue on this thing. Everything's about to go higher.
Well, there's actually exactly what you were talking about just a couple of weeks ago. I put it on my newsletter where there was a Hamilton property. You guys probably know about it. It was a duplex or a legal 2 unit that was done up pretty nicely, and it went 30 offers. And it went up to 1.22 or something.
Wasn't somebody here that bought that property or no?
Probably.
I think
listed.
I know.
Oh, really?
I know a couple. Okay. I know a couple guys here that put offers in.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
it was like 30 offers.
I think it was a listing. It was one of our listings from someone on our team. I think too.
Got it.
So I think it was something like $7.99 or $8.99, and it went for 1.22, and everybody's like crazy. 30 offers. It's nuts. But it was already a 2 unit, and it's a 200-foot deep lot.
Oh, got it.
So if let's say 30 people went in and 29 people did not even think about garden suite, and that highest bidder said, I'm gonna go like just blow everyone out of the water. I'm gonna go 1.22. I'm gonna build an 800 square foot single family, or not single family, but garden suite, 800 square foot. 800 square foot is like a little bungalow, like it's like a normal bungalow on the mountain, right? Yeah. I put in 2 bedrooms plus an office, make it beautiful. Spend $300,000 on it. It's gonna be deep in there. It's gonna be nice for a family. Now, what is that property worth from the cash flow perspective, from the investment perspective?
You just added on $2,000 more or 50% more income.
Yeah.
You added 50% more income onto that property. 50%.
Right.
In this case, with this type of unit, it's even more. Right. But yeah, you get your point. But that type of unit's even above and beyond that, I think.
Jeez.
So it's what's coming down the future. The density is going up. And some people are going to look at this and think it's like, this is crazy. We can't be doing this. But I think it's going to be necessary.
It's the only way for this area to grow. Otherwise, you're running water lines, freaking how far north, how far east and west, infrastructure, bus lines, transportation routes. We need to build density, whether any of us want it or not.
Well, some people don't want the population growth or like the immigration. They're like, you know what? We have enough housing problems. Let's reduce the flow of immigration. But our economy is growing from this immigration. Like they don't see that side of it as well. There's a lot of benefits to it, and our immigration system is pretty good. I hope the Liberals don't change it much, so they might ruin it. There's definitely that possibility, but it works out pretty well.
Right now, we have been pretty lucky. I think over the last however many years, decades, we've had great quality immigration.
Well, the system's just set up. The points-based system is just different than some other systems. It's been good.
Our parents snuck in, but I mean that was different. They snuck in. Our dad got in. Our dad snuck in on a boat.
Well, when they started,
our dad got kicked out of basically Austria. Said, hey, listen, you're either going back to what was then Yugoslavia, or the church is going to pay for a boat ride to Canada or Australia. You pick, and you got to decide now.
At that time when they started, I think it was arms wide open to everyone. They were just like, just come here, please, and start building this place out.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was us. Yeah, that was us in the early 80s.
Oh, like your family?
Yeah. And
what were the options? Where else would your family have gone if it wasn't Canada? Or was Canada like the only option you were considering?
Second choice to America.
The first choice was America.
Oh, I forget. Yeah, I forget.
Yeah, the first choice. It was basically...
we're lucky enough to have Andy Tren and Sweet Additions, his company, because America said no to Andy Tren.
We've always been second choice to America. If you look at all the global...
So everybody here didn't get their first choice. We all got the second choice. Everyone here is basically an outcast in some capacity from some lineage in their family from wherever they originally were and said, listen, we don't want you here for a reason, or you're choosing not to be here, and you end up in Canada. Not even as your first choice.
Hey, it worked out, right?
It did work out. Somehow it worked out. But yeah, that's what happened to you guys. And it was only the 80s that your family came here. For some reason, I thought it was longer than that.
That is a long time ago. You're old.
Like 1980.
Yeah. Like Andy just looked at me right now. He's like, yeah, that is pretty old, dude. That's like 1980. Yeah, got it. Okay, so Andy, from what you're seeing, what do we see? What do we see over the next few years? Where does this go? Just keep ramping up, slow and steady?
I think so. I think its density is going to be the playbook for every municipal, like every level of government, right? Municipal, provincial, federal. They were going to force it. They're going to push for it, right? They're not going to slow down with the immigration, right? Because that's their strategy for growth. Sprawl is kind of out of the question because it's not even really about when you hear the news, they talk a lot about environmental, which is true, right? Like agricultural topsoil and all that. It's true, but it's more financial. Like they can't afford to build the infrastructure out, right? Like you build, like they're already
You mean they're not?
defaulting.
Are you trying to tell me they're not telling us the whole story when they say that? Are you
yeah.
trying?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really, because then it's kind of like gets into like, well, why are you fiscally irresponsible, blah, 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 right? So it's really just focused on, the density issue. And, that's really their focus, right? Because they can't support the sprawl, the kind of the infrastructure cost of that. I mean, already it's very difficult to maintain a lot of the existing, low density areas, right? So they recognize that, the planners recognize that, and they say, well, we already have the sewers, we already have the utilities, we can support a lot more housing, and that's going to be the playbook. We can argue all day what it should be, what it could be, whatever it is. This is what it is, and I think we just need to recognize that and kind of navigate that landscape of housing development. And, how can we benefit from it? Obviously, we can make money from it, but at the same time, we can build more housing, which is what everyone needs, right? Yeah.
What's interesting? The housing minister, the federal housing minister, he came out. They're looking at all these. The Liberals ran on these election promises of a bunch of changes to the housing market, like a flipping tax and that type of thing. And the Bank of Canada came out in November. They started kind of trashing investors, saying investors are the reason that the prices are going up and that type of stuff. And they've been really lumping in investors, like long-term investors and speculators, like or people that are flipping properties, lumping them all into one group. And it was just last week, it was the first time I had heard it at least, that the housing minister had come out and he said, well, look, he goes, some of these, what he called mom and pop investors are buying properties and providing rental units. And he goes, that's a service and we need them. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And it was the first time that I've heard them separate people that are buying properties, adding second suites, garden suites, that type of thing, and providing affordable rental units to people versus people that are just trying to buy and speculate and flip properties for like whatever quick cash or profit somehow. And I'm just wondering how or if they're going to view those things differently with these changes, because from that talk, it was interesting because I'm like, that's the first time I've heard them really separate out the two versus just lumping all investors in together. Because I'm with you. I think what long-term investors that are providing these units to people, they're providing a service that the government hasn't been able to provide. And that's why the government has consistently changed the laws to be able to allow for these types of things. I think the last change to allow for the second suites is 2011, the law was passed, and it didn't, then most municipalities started really doing it a couple of years later. 2013, 2014 is when it was kind of more streamlined. I think they were given 2 years to kind of get it straightened out, right? Right. So that was the government looking to the private investor, and these recommendations now that are coming and where their focus is again, the government looking to the private investor to fix something that they couldn't when it comes to affordable housing units. Right.
So maybe some of the crackdown is going to come on investors, not from people who are buying longer term rental properties. Maybe it'll just be if you buy and sell this home and it's not your primary place of residence within a certain number of years,
right? Now,
we're going to have like a speculative tax
if
on you.
If you read the mandate letter, the mandate letter that was sent out to the minister from the Prime Minister's office to the minister in December, the mandate letter said it's 12 months if you sell it within 12 months. That's what it said. Now, is that what they're going to do? We don't know. Nothing's been decided. But that's what it said. That was the big one for speculation. That one, and
just 12 months. You can barely build a new house in 12 months.
No, if you buy the house and then resell it, not develop
buy
the house.
already built.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and then if you and then the other one was a temporary ban on foreign buyers in the markets, which I was like, yeah, I forgot about that one, but they did run on that, and that's in the mandate letter if you look it up. Right, so temporary.
I feel like that one's always circumvented by start a Canadian corporation, get Canadian directors to be on the corporate board, and then you can funnel in your foreign money to that Canadian corp.
Yeah, or you just have your student with
the
non-permanent residents. A foreign
yeah.
student has status here; they can buy something.
I don't really have the data for that, but to me, it's like when they say foreign buyers, it's kind of like somebody who maybe they have their kid here in school or they have the second citizenship here. There's some kind of tie to Canada. Like I just don't see. It's kind of like I'm thinking, hey, you know what? I don't know, like. a country in Eastern Europe is a great place to invest, and I have no relationship with anyone.
Yeah.
Am I just going to go and just invest in real
Like
estate?
how
there?
much are we stopping
like-
by the whole foreign buyer?
So the foreign,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of foreign in the true sense of foreign. I think a lot of these foreigners, they have some ties.
a lot
here,
of these
right?
foreigners.
Yeah, well,
a lot
quote
of these
unquote,
foreigners.
just quote unquote foreigners.
Who
Yeah,
are
no, I
these
think you're right.
foreigners
I don't think it's
who are
gonna have-
buying here?
I don't think it has a
Yeah,
massive
you're right. You're right.
impact.
Yeah.
I just think it's for headline. A lot of these things are for headlines,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even the anti-flipping tax. Just think, like the way it was
So
worded.
basically, nothing's going to help.
Well, no, I think it'll help. It'll help in the short term. I don't think in the long term. When they put the foreign buyer tax in 2017, it helped in the short term, right? It froze the market for a period of months. It wasn't for a long period of time, but it froze the market. Market came off. It's
Yeah.
like fraud. You know,
I just think to Andy's point there, yeah, like the money's coming in because somebody has their son or daughter here in
Yeah.
school. They have a legal Canadian bank account, wire over a couple $1 million, you buy a property, and that's not a foreign buyer. That's somebody who has legal status in the country.
Yeah, but if they change the rules around, I mean, they do have some insight into this, right? So I agree with you guys, but there is some insight into it. I don't like to give the government that much credit, but for this one, I got to give them some credit. So it's going to be a headline. They'll see something, and it's no different than the foreign buyer tax. It did remove some speculation from the market,
Sure.
right? So it's going to remove some. Is it going to drastically change it? No, I'm with you. I don't think so.
Andy, when we first started, I think in the year, maybe it was a few years in around 2010, we met somebody who called us to, remember that condo, Nick? And someone from South Korea bought 40 condos in one building, 40. And all we knew is they were from South Korea.
Right.
And it was around Yonge in the 401.
Well, you guys sold it?
No, we
Oh.
were, wasn't it Yonge or 401 or downtown?
No, it was downtown.
Downtown. Yeah, I'm getting confused.
And they had to get the money out.
They
or
had to get their
something.
money back. Like they kind of like had a change of heart.
Right.
And they were trying to sell. They were all vacant except for like,
No, they bought them because they had to get the money out of Korea.
they got the money out of Korea, but now they were trying to sell the properties here. Or were we,
No, they
were
were
we
just a
there just to
handful.
rent them out? I forget.
Yeah, I forget, but it was only a handful. No, they were keeping the majority. I think
Were
it
they?
wasn't. There wasn't a panic
So
sale.
between us, we can barely
Yeah.
remember any
But we
details.
do
of the
remember
story.
the fact that
40.
they bought it was like just over 40, and they had to. They just
So that would be an example of somebody coming in here, I guess, in some legal capacity, and not just buying one, but buying 40.
Yeah.
So we see it. We have seen it.
Yeah, I just so I think it's going to do something. To your point, I think right now that the market dynamics are so out of whack that those changes don't put them back into they don't even the playing field. Like they don't put them back into balance. They're still going to be out of whack. They might just be less out of whack.
Yeah,
That's the way I
agreed.
kind of look at that.
So, Andy, I have a question for you. It's been a challenging few years for everyone with all this COVID stuff, and then property prices and interest rates are like zero. That's not challenging, I guess. But how are you keeping yourself sane these days? Like, do you have any friends that you keep in touch with regularly where you can kind of just vent together about like?
Yeah,
just,
you guys. That's
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
We vent a lot on things that we aren't talking about right now.
Yeah.
this
We vented
podcast.
a little bit before we started recording about a bunch of stuff. But like, do you have some routines that you do when you catch yourself getting a little bit stressed out, when you're overworked? How are you just managing yourself right now? We didn't talk about that. Do you have some things that you like? I know for myself, when I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed and stressed, I have to get back to getting up earlier in the morning and having some quiet time to myself every morning. That does it for me.
Yeah.
You know, I need to build that routine back up if I had gotten away from that routine. Do you have anything that really works for you? Like Nick, for example, he has to go to the gym in the morning, and that's kind of your meditative time and your time to be alone and think and kind of work. What's some stuff that works for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't really had a real tough time throughout these past couple of years. I kind of just look at it as like it is what it is, right? You just kind of make the best out of it. I'm kind of like you in that I really like watching, videos and content on economics. And that kind of is like, that's my therapy. It's kind of weird.
It is weird. I don't think there's that many of us, so it's good to meet another one of us. Andy.
Yeah, like I will do some work on my computer. I'll do some drafting and just house designs, and I'll have an economics podcast in the background. And just, to me, that's kind of like therapy. And I don't know. I really just kind of look at the situation. I like to look at things the way they are, and just if things are good, great, I enjoy it. And if things are bad, it's like, hey, it is what it is, right? Do the best you can. So I haven't really struggled with it. And I'm busy, with the kids and the family. So things have been pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's a great answer, because most people, I think, over the last couple of years have been struggling a little bit with some stuff. I think you've probably been so busy with Sweet Additions that you haven't had time to even freak out about anything. You're just a busy guy. What are the services for anyone who doesn't know? What services are you offering with Suite Additions right now? Where are you at? Who's working with you? Give us some description.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we are still, our primary bread and butter is still doing design and permit work for second suites. So that's our main focus. So mostly what happens is that, people contact us and say, we have this property. We want you to help us get started on the design permit process, and we'll give them a timeline. A lot of times, they're not sure about about their property and whether it's eligible. And then so we have a consultation, whether it's Zoom or whether it's on site. And there is a fee for that, but then what happens is that if they pursue working with us on the design, that gets deducted later on. So it's a win-win. Like we're able to provide them a lot of information, and it's also worthwhile for our team to kind of get into that process. And
I know you've grown a lot. Are you still taking new clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are we're taking clients, and we're growing our internal team as well. To a certain point, we don't necessarily want to be able to do every project. One of our focus is to educate people as well. And we're even having people that we're training to kind of do what we do. Just because we've said, there's no way we can put a dent to kind of this housing issue. And whatever we can do just to kind of add a little bit. I mean, even with what you guys have done with Rockstar and all the investors here, the vast majority of a lot of these investors have purchased housing, and they've added these second units. And think about all the additional affordable housing units that have been put in by, just these investors that you talk about, Nick, right? Like how important it is for a lot of small investors to add to the housing stock. I don't know what the numbers are. It's probably in the thousands of housing units that weren't there, that all of these investors had to go through a lot of shit in order to kind of, make it a nice, comfortable, safe, legal housing unit, right? Like the government can't do that. So I think that's, kudos to you guys as well for kind of having that, that platform to be able to have a lot of these investors. And really it comes down to what our focus is giving people the education and the resources to be able to go and do these. And, there's a lot of talk about investors, causing housing prices to go up. But from a first principles perspective, we're building more housing units. We're creating wealth. Everybody's benefiting from it at the end of the day. So,
yeah, I never really thought about it the way you're saying it, because you're right. I would say every single investor that we work with is very proud of the quality. If they've added a second suite into an existing property that they have, they're very proud of how much they've updated the property and the quality of the housing unit that they're offering to the market. I would say to a person, everyone has said that they're so proud of what they were able to do. It hasn't been, I just kind of schlepped together something and rented it out whatever I could. It's been, I really kind of did something good here. So I've never thought
the
about
reason for that is because it's not easy, right? Like during that process, they had to deal with the city, they had to deal with contractors, they had to deal with tenants, and it was not easy. And every process we go through with our clients, it's always not 100% easy, right? It gets easier when they start doing the second, third, and fourth one, but it's always a challenge. And at the end of it, they're so proud of it, like you say, because they've gone through all that nonsense to get to where it is. And they brought an actual brand new housing unit. And the fast start class that I do with you guys here, the first slide I show this really horrible like basement apartment from the 80s or the 90s, like a frat house. And I said, you guys ready to build one of these? And everybody's like, whoa, what is this? And then the second image is an image of like one of my clients, Kelly. She, I always show her nice unit with the kitchen. I'm like, no, this is what you guys would be doing. This is the kind of the goal. And people are excited to do that, right? So
it gives us a sense of pride. And that's cool. You brought up the class that you teach here to Rockstar members to do all this stuff. And Andy, you've been doing that for quite some time now. And thank you for doing that, because the confidence that you've given people who wouldn't have who if you've not got into real estate, you just don't have the confidence to say, I'm not only going to buy this property, I'm going to convert it to have a legal second unit in it by doing a second suite. So, I mean, kudos to you to kind of sharing that kind of information, because you're a busy guy. You have a family. There's no need for you to be spending extra time doing that kind of stuff. So thank you for doing that over the years. I mean, you've really helped a lot of people see different opportunities that they maybe didn't think that was possible for themselves. So we appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, 100%. And it helps me as well, right? So people reach out to me for help as well. So it's great when I see people do it, because then it's kind of like they feel, like you said, they feel proud, and they essentially become a small developer. and then they can do other things later on if they want to. So
I was just thinking the next thing we have to do is we have to go to the UFC again. Remember we went to the UFC together and we haven't been to the UFC in a while. We have to go to the UFC again. That was the Max Holloway fight that we went to. Remember that?
Yeah,
It was
that was a
Max.
good fight.
Yeah, that was a good fight. And I feel like there hasn't been, because of COVID again. I'm like, why? There hasn't been a good fight in Toronto in a long time. Why is that?
They're avoiding
Actually,
here like the
I totally
plague.
forgot for a
Yeah.
while. Why has there been no good fighting in Toronto? But we have to go see another UFC.
and then we
fight.
got to go to Montfort at 2 a.m.
Oh,
to
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's where we end
that's
up.
standard.
Montfort's a classic in Oakville at 2 a.m. Yeah, there's many stories from Montfort at 2 a.m. Montfort has all its stories from 2. If you drive by Montfort and you see anyone there after 2 a.m. on the weekend, you know there's something going down in that place. But Andy, anything else that you want? What's the URL for Sweet Editions? How do people contact you? What else can you share?
sweeteditions.com, old school.
Sweeteditions.com. You can find Andy Tran's information there. Anything else that you wanted to chat about that we didn't chat about yet?
No, I think that covers a lot.
I was teeing Andy out. Like, what topic do we want to go into here? We'll save
We'll go
any other-
offline for
Yeah,
that.
we'll save any other topics for another time. But Andy, thank you so much for doing this,
My
man.
pleasure.
Really,
Thanks,
really
guys.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.